This is Newshour, live from the BBC World Service with me, TimFranks. A British man has died and 7 people are in a critical condition after a flight from London to Singapore was hit by severe turbulence. The authorities in Thailand, where the aircraft made an emergency landing, have said that the man is likely to have had a heart attack. 30 people on board were injured and taken to hospital in Bangkok. Passengers have described how the force of the turbulence launched, as they put it, those not wearing seatbelts into the ceiling, denting the luggage bins overhead. The BBC has been speaking to Andrew Davis from the airport in Bangkok. He described what had happened on the flight.
The seatbelt sign came on. Thankfully, I'm quite diligent about these things, and I popped my seatbelt on straight away. And literally, I think, as soon as I put it on, just a sudden thud and the aircraft dropping. The thing that really stays in my mind is just seeing things and possessions and cushions and blankets and bottles and cups and plates just flying up. I ended up covered in coffee. I really don't know how long it lasted, maybe a few seconds or so. But when it stopped, everybody was very shaken. Made a little joke of it to make light of it with the gentleman next to me. I mean, there was this odd sense of calm at first, but when I looked behind me, there was this, awful sight of some of the oxygen masks had come down. There was a lady with a really deep, nasty gash on her head, and she was covered in blood.
Andrew Davis, well, the BBC's Jonathan Heard is also at Bangkok Airport, and he's been speaking to other survivors.
Well, it was very unexpected. I mean, it was the last stage of what's always a very long flight, and I've done it many times myself from London to Singapore. It's a usually 12 and a half hour flight. And in those last couple of hours, typically, because it's an overnight flight, they will serve you breakfast before you land, and that's what had just happened. The passengers say they'd just been served breakfast. Many of them had just woken up from sleeping overnight. A lot had gone to the bathroom. There was apparently a warning to put seatbelts on and a bit of turbulence, and then out of the blue, the plane just plunged. And of course, anybody who was not secured with a seatbelt, given how far it fell, we believe about 6,000 feet, nearly 2,000 meters. Those people just shot up and hit whatever was above them. In some cases, it was the overhead lockers for luggage. In some cases, it was the ceiling. I mean, we've seen the effects of, sudden dramatic turbulence like this before. This one was just rather worse. I mean, the Singapore Airlines crew told the passengers, in all their experience, they'd never had a drop as bad as that. It was the worst they'd ever experienced. Immediately after that, the passengers said, there was a calm, but of course some people were really badly injured. And that was the point at which they were already in Thai airspace anyway, descending, would have been beginning to descend a little after that towards Singapore, and the captain made the decision to make an emergency landing at Bangkok so that those who had been injured could get medical treatment.
And have you got the latest in terms of the numbers who have been taken off for treatment in hospital? I mean, clearly it was an extremely serious incident. Have you got an idea on that? The hospital is saying 71 people have been treated. Now, quite a lot of those were fairly minor injuries. We've seen people with sort of just a bandage on their heads where they hit them. They're absolutely fine. But several people are in critical condition. I mean, so it gives you an idea of the forces that were unleashed by this drop. And in fact, when you look at the images that come in from inside the plane, it's absolute bedlam. It looks like a tornado has gone through it. It's really left a searing impression on the people who experienced it. It was such a shock for them. The BBC's Jonathan Heard speaking to us from Bangkok Airport. It is, thankfully, very rare that someone dies during mid-air events like this. But how common is extreme turbulence? Paul Williams is Professor of Atmospheric Science at the University of Reading in England.
It's important to stress that it is exceptionally rare. There are fatalities. The latest one that I'm aware of before today happened in 2009. Something like 0.1% of the atmosphere at 30 or 40,000 feet has turbulence in it strong enough to lift you out of your seat if you're not seatbelted. So for any nervous flyers, the chance of your particular flight encountering this severe turbulence is very rare. But of course, given how many aircraft are in the skies, sooner or later, one of them will be unfortunate enough to hit this turbulence, as has happened today.
How far can it be detected in advance? I mean, I guess if you're flying into a storm, you're likely to see a bank of clouds, and you're also, I mean, presumably, meteorologists can help forecast that storm. But how far can turbulence be plotted and predicted?
Well, you're absolutely right that storms are an important source of turbulence. But as you say, at least you can see them with the naked eye, and they show up on the radar. So at least in theory, they shouldn't be particularly problematic. But there is another kind of turbulence called clear air turbulence that is generated by very powerful currents in the atmosphere called jet streams. And this is invisible. The skies can be blue, the seatbelt sign can be off. We do forecast it, but just like a weather forecast, they're not 100% perfect. They're about 75 to 80% perfect, which means there's an additional 20 to 25% or so of turbulence that we just can't forecast using the best science that we have today.
How far are you able to say that the prevalence of extreme turbulence is growing as a result of the changes to the climate that we're witnessing?
Well, I set out about a decade ago to study this. Initially, we were running computer simulations of the future, and they were showing that as the jet stream evolved in response to the changing temperatures, they were indicating a doubling or a trebling in some parts of the world in the amount of severe turbulence. And then most recently, we've actually analysed historic data and found that those increases have already begun. So in fact, there's been a 55% increase today in the amount of severe turbulence over the North Atlantic, for example, compared to 40 years ago. So we began with this prediction for the future from computer models, and subsequently that prediction has been shown to be true. We do see that turbulence has already started to increase, and the link to climate change is really quite clear.
Do you think it might get to the point where airline companies, air traffic control might have to think about altering flight paths to reduce the risk of encountering turbulence?
I don't think that's on the cards. Even if we double or treble the very small amount of turbulence in the atmosphere, it will still be very small. So I'm not suggesting that we'll have to stop flying through certain parts of airspace. I'm not suggesting that planes will start falling out of the sky. But I am suggesting that we can look forward to a future with a doubling or a trebling of the amount of severe turbulence in the atmosphere. And unless we come up with cleverer ways of flying around the turbulence, then it does logically follow that, twice as much turbulence will lead to twice as many planes encountering turbulence and twice as many injuries, sadly, as well.
One lesson is, on the whole, it is a good idea if you're sitting down to have your seatbelt on.
It's not only a good idea, it's an absolutely fantastic idea, and I wouldn't do anything other than that. Personally, when I fly, I keep my seatbelt fastened all the time, and the only time I take it off is for a quick trip to the restroom. It's always struck me as a little ironic that it's illegal to drive down the road at 20 miles an hour without a seatbelt. But if you're flying at hundreds of miles an hour at 35,000 feet, as long as the seatbelt sign's not on, you're free to take your seatbelt off.
Professor Paul Williams, Professor of Atmospheric Science at the University of Reading. You're listening to Newshour, live from the BBC.